Well, I think I'll go back on my iPad and do just that in a moment. You know, groupthink can be really fun and instructive, so we'll see how that goes today. Thanks to Bob Greavy for helping us begin the conversation with your creative tool that's going to allow us to share our thoughts with others. In Oklahoma, we are so fortunate to have not only creative and innovative minds, but also to have the support system of the group Creative Oklahoma to nurture those ideas and help bring those ideas, events like this, to fruition. Creative Oklahoma is privileged to have two prominent leaders from our state serve in roles that have really helped cultivate the growth of this organization and the creative movement across our state. So if you would, please welcome the founding chairman of Creative Oklahoma and president of Oklahoma State University, Burns Hargis, and the current chairman of Creative Oklahoma and the president of the University of Central Oklahoma, Don Betts.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Great Creativity Forum, the third of such. Don, as we all know, creativity and innovation are driving our global economy in the 21st century and thereafter. And without new ideas and out-of-the-box thinking, we just can't compete.
Well, you're absolutely right, Burns. We also cannot solve the problems, the most pressing problems of the quality of life issues, without new ideas and new solutions. So today, we are here to learn how to weave the threads of creativity for a more innovative society.
Someone who's been very instrumental in helping us weave these threads is a dear friend of ours and a friend of Creative Oklahoma. He helped us plant the seeds that inspired the forums like this and helped us nurture creativity in our state. When Creative Oklahoma's executive director, Susan McCalmont, and that name should create some applause. Susan. She truly is the mother of this whole effort. And another, John McCarroll, who was head of OETA and was a board member, and I first met up with this person in early 2005. He had worked in the UK and in Singapore and knew firsthand the importance of unleashing the creativity of our children and teachers in our schools to increase innovation. He also worked in the global economy, but was engaged in some very difficult but creative conversations in Northern Ireland during the peace talks and thereafter. He then moved to a foreign country. He came to Los Angeles and took a position at the Getty, where we met with him, and he began looking for a U.S. state that was involved in a serious creativity effort. We were just beginning our grassroots conversation here in Oklahoma when we met him and mutually decided that Oklahoma would be perfect. There was great receptivity to the idea of being a laboratory of sorts, a laboratory for change.
We are so fortunate that he saw the creative spark in Oklahomans that Burns and I witness every day. Sir Ken suggested creativity is the fuel to change perceptions about our state and to bring systemic change, bring us together around the areas of education, commerce, and culture. Sir Ken remains one of our most trusted advisors for Creative Oklahoma. He's recognized worldwide as a leading expert in creativity and innovation. He's an award-winning author, a sought-after keynote about how to cultivate creativity. In fact, after Ken's early work with us in 2006 and 2007, several of our universities here, including OSU and UCO, began their own campus creativity initiatives. Burns even left Oklahoma City to lead that effort in Stillwater.
Last night, we were honored to name Sir Ken a Creativity Ambassador of Oklahoma for his continual guidance and leadership and continuing to share our Oklahoma dream to become a creative state. Today, it's our pleasure to introduce you to a real leader. And if you don't believe me, go to TED. He is the leading speaker of all time on TED, having been viewed 260 million times. As Bart Conner says, if you don't like creativity, blame Ken Robinson. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sir Ken Robinson.
and Burns. Good morning. How are you? Actually, you know, the talk I did on TED has been downloaded. It's been seen by 300 million people, we think. It's been downloaded, actually been downloaded about 14 million times. But it gets shown to lots of large groups. My daughter showed me a video recently of 2 kittens on TED that's been downloaded 60 million times. So I'm not getting carried away, frankly. I think if I were a little fairier and a little cuter, I'd have even more impact. It is a great pleasure to be back in Oklahoma. I say that because you have to. What am I going to say? I really wish I wasn't here again. This is getting me down. But actually, I've been coming to Oklahoma for 7 years now, on and off, as Burns says and Don said. And I do think it's the most extraordinary place. I was saying last night, it's one of the places that people have opinions about who've never been here. You know, I mean, when I'm traveling outside the country, outside of America, if I say that Oklahoma wants to become the state of creativity, people go, really? Inside America, people go, really? And I say, yes, really, because, you know, wherever you've got people, we have 3.5 million people in Oklahoma, you have deep reserves of natural talent. I feel human talent is like natural resources. It's buried beneath the surface. And you often have to go looking for it. It's something that doesn't always manifest itself and show itself in the way you would expect it to. I'm thinking, for example, of the fantastic compositions we just heard. I don't know when you've sat down to decide to compose music, but my guess is there was a time in your life, I'm looking at the 3 students here, when you didn't know you could even do it. And then you discovered that you did. And if you hadn't had the opportunity, if nobody had presented that opportunity, how would they have ever known? My wife is a big fan of Elvis Presley. And that's a slight understatement, actually. There are 3 of us in this marriage. Fortunately, I'm alive. So it's a small advantage, frankly, but, you know, 35 years, the same look of disappointment at breakfast. It wears you down, you know. It's you again, yes. He's dead. And I'm sick of the wig. But Elvis Presley went to school in Tupelo, Mississippi. He wasn't allowed in the glee club at school. They said he would ruin their sound. Elvis. Well, we all know what great heights the glee club went on to. You know, one said, managed to keep Elvis out of their way. And I find this, that people discover extraordinary talents within themselves that they wouldn't otherwise know unless the opportunity is presented to them. And that's really at the heart of the Oklahoma Creativity Project. It's creating conditions where people will discover things about themselves they didn't know and creative possibilities they hadn't imagined. And it's vital for all the reasons that Bart and Jennifer pointed out that we should do this. It's vital for reasons of commerce, it's vital for education, it's vital for culture. And part of the reason this is so important is the rate of change. It's not the only reason, but it's one of them. I published a book 10 years ago called Out of Our Minds, Learning to be Creative. This book is terrific. You'd be foolish not to buy this book. It's available outside, I think, so I'll wait here while you pop out. No, but about 10 years ago, I was asked if about a year ago, the publisher said, would you like to make any changes to the book? And I thought, well, I'll have a quick look, you know, because they want to do a 10th anniversary edition of it. And they said, you know, we're going to do a new cover. Would you like to make any changes to the text? Well, it seemed to me improbable, frankly, that it could be improved. I mean, it was, after all, a masterwork that I'd written myself. But I said I'd take a quick look at it. I rewrote the entire book from start to finish. And the reason is so much has happened in 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, there were no smartphones, there was no Twitter. 10 years ago, people didn't tweet, did they? I mean, if they did, they were discouraged, weren't they? People would say, why are you doing that? You know, this is... Would you mind stepping outside if you have to do that? This is annoying us all. There was no iPods, no iPads. The world is changing on its axis almost faster than you can possibly imagine. And it's all the result of this extraordinary power of human creativity. But it's presenting challenges now which are, I think, unpredictable, uncertain, and unprecedented. And we have to look deeply now into our own reserves and decide how best we can challenge them. And it's a three-step process, I believe. The first is we have to think differently about people, about our own abilities, about the depth of our talents. It's personal. Secondly, it's about great groups. It's about knowing how groups function and how we can get them to work more effectively. And thirdly, it's about a culture of innovation, which is what we want to talk about during this session. We have some great people here to help us think about it, who are going to come along in just a minute. By the way, I rewrote Out of Our Minds on Microsoft Word. Do you know Microsoft Word? I don't know if you noticed, but Microsoft Word has opinions. Have you noticed? You get squiggles if it doesn't like what you've written. I don't mind the squiggles that tell you you've made a mistake. It's the one where the squiggles I don't like are the ones where Bill Gates just disapproves of what you've just said. It disapproves of things like the passive voice. I wrote this sentence: the foundations of the modern intelligence test were laid in the late 19th century by Sir Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin. That's true, by the way. It's a good sentence, isn't it? I'll read it again for you. The foundations of the modern intelligence test were laid in the late 19th century by Sir Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin. Microsoft Word didn't like that. It has the passive voice in it, were laid. So it helpfully suggested this alternative. In the late 19th century, Sir Francis Galton laid a cousin of Charles Darwin. The foundation of the modern intelligence test. I had no idea. But I mentioned it for two reasons, really. One of the reasons we need to think differently about innovation and creativity is that the world is changing so quickly. One of the reasons it's changing so fast is the impact of technology, which is changing everything. It always did, by the way. These new digital tools make available possibilities that were previously inconceivable. But humankind, human culture, has always been transformed by the use of tools. And these are just the latest iteration of tools, but they are generally transformative. I mean, a symphony orchestra relies on tools. This wonderful music we heard earlier was made possible through advanced tools. I mean, a violin, a cello, all the instruments that were being played are simply tools. And they've evolved over a very long time. The whole tradition of classical music was made possible by the evolution of the tools through which it manifested. But the tools themselves have no music in them. You can have a cupboard full of these instruments and no music will come out of them. To make great music, you need great musicians, you need great composers who can breathe life into the instruments. It's true of a palette of paints. A palette of paints has no art in it, but artists have plenty of art inside of them if the tools are available to them. It's true with the new digital technologies. There are no great novels inside word processors until a great novelist sits down to compose one. So the tools make possible things we couldn't do before. But it hasn't removed the need to dig deeply into our creative reserves to understand how to use them. And part of what we're trying to do here is to look at how the new technologies can make available new senses of creative possibility. But by the way, and you'll hear later on at lunch from Peter Diamandis, the evolution in technology has not stopped. If anything, it's only really just beginning. When I was growing up, I grew up in Liverpool in the 1950s. And we had 4 gadgets. That's 5, isn't it? 4 gadgets that you could buy from Best Buy, if there had been a Best Buy. We had a radio. Everyone always had a radio. We got a television, I think, when I was 10. And it had 2 channels in black and white. No remote control. Actually, there was a sort of remote control. It was my young brother Neil, who used to propel towards the television with instructions to change the channel. And we still do, even though he's 56. We had a telephone. We got that when I was 9. And it was a party line. Do you remember party lines? For those of you who don't know this, when telephones were being introduced, there weren't enough numbers to give everybody one, and enough cables. So they used to run a cable to a neighborhood and run subsidiary cables off it, and everybody shared the same line. And there was an operator who would connect you to it. What it meant was that anybody theoretically could pick up the telephone and listen in to the conversation of anybody else who happened to be using the line. And they did. It was like an early form of Facebook. It was. And a record player. We got a record player when I was 10, and one record, which was Tom Dooley by the Kingston Trio. Do you remember Tom Dooley? Anybody? It was the only record we had. Why are you clapping, Tom Dooley? I have absolutely no idea. It was the only record we had, and for about 3 months, so we played it on every family occasion. Your cousin's getting married, Tom Dooley. Your uncle's dead, Tom Dooley. It was the all-purpose anthem. If you had those 4 gadgets, there was no reason to go back to Best Buy. There was no Best Buy. And I compare that now, in the space of a single generation, really, to the way the world's transformed by current technologies. And, as you'll hear later, this has not stopped. All the gadgets we think are so groovy just now, I promise you, will be looked back on by your grandchildren as being pathetically quaint. You'll be showing your grandchildren, those of you in your 20s and 30s, pictures of you with your iPad, and they'll be smiling at you patronizingly and saying, really? What? It was like a thing? Like you held it in your hand? Really? Seriously? You had hands? You know. What was that? Yeah. We're entering a point that is often referred to as a singularity, where information systems may merge with the human mind. You combine that with population growth and the strain on the Earth's resources, we are facing challenges we've never faced before. And ironically, they're the result of human creativity. But the answer is not to withdraw from creativity, but to invest more deeply in it. There are 3 terms, and Jennifer referred to them, that are important in thinking about a culture of innovation. The first is imagination, which is the ability to bring to mind things that aren't present to our senses, which is, I believe, the most distinctive set of powers that human beings possess. With imagination, you can visit the past, you can anticipate the future, you can visit other people's sense of the present, you can empathize. Creativity is a step on. Creativity is putting your imagination to work. It's a very practical thing. You have to be doing something to be creative, and it's a process we can facilitate, support, and nurture. Innovation is putting good ideas into practice, and as Jennifer and Bart said, you can't go straight to innovation, you have to go via imagination and creativity, which is what this initiative across Oklahoma is about. There was a study done 2 years ago by IBM of 3,000 CEOs around the world, and they asked them what the most urgent priorities are that they face. They said they had 2. The first is adaptability. They said, how do you run organizations that can adapt to rapid change? And by the way, look at the recent history of companies that have gone under, like Kodak, Polaroid, you can name them. Some of the great icons of American business have simply disappeared because they didn't adapt. But the top priority, they said, is creativity. How do you run organizations which foster fresh and original thinking for products, services, and ideas? And it's that set of capacities that not only makes companies thrive, but great states and great communities like Oklahoma and all the states that you come from. That pulse of human creativity is what opens up the future to us and will help to make it sustainable. So how do we do it? Time is short this morning, and there are a number of people we want to engage in conversation. So I just want to give this short agenda for this. At the moment, it is people who have ideas. This is the important thing to recognize. Tools offer all kinds of extensive and extended capacities, but they don't of themselves generate creative thinking. That's what we do with the use of the tools, and great tools facilitate fresh sorts of ideas. The music we heard wouldn't have been possible without the instruments, but the instruments couldn't have done it on their own. It's a conversation between discipline, technology, and human ingenuity, and skill and discipline. So it's about people, and in a moment we're going to bring up 2 remarkable people who have, I think, established a very distinctive creative imprint on their own lives. Jesse Tabish and Desmond Mason. The second is that, as I say, creativity is about often the dynamism between people, and there's a reason for it. The human mind is very diverse, our talents are very diverse, and they're highly dynamic. A great team mirrors a single human mind, in that a great team is diverse, like the group we watched earlier, diverse talents joined to a single purpose, a dynamic process that makes their difference a strength, not a weakness. And it's also the function of a great team to have a particular purpose, and they may just be as a team for that particular time. But diversity is often the pulse of creativity. This is why the cultural argument for creativity is so important. I think the best way I can explain this, I came across this recently, which was a comment on what it is to be British. You could say American, by the way. It wouldn't really matter, but as this was British, I'll just read it to you. People often struggle to say, well, what does being British mean? I came across this on the internet. It said that being British these days means driving home in a German car, stopping to collect some Irish lager, some Danish lager or Irish Guinness, sitting at home on a Swedish sofa, eating an Indian curry or a Greek kebab, and watching American programs on a Japanese TV. And the most British thing of all, suspicion of anything foreign. Which is broadly the case. But diversity has always been at the heart of innovation, bringing together different points of view and melding them into a new series of perceptions. It's why great teams work, and we'll be talking a little bit about teams and groups in a few minutes. But the culture of innovation is, I think, the key idea here. Culture is an organic term, and we are organic creatures. A lot of our institutions are based on mechanical and mechanistic metaphors. You know, if you look at the management chart of many organizations, it looks like a wiring diagram. Do you know what I mean? It looks, there are wires, there are kind of arrows and boxes. It looks like some kind of mechanical drawing. And it all suggests that human organizations are like mechanisms. In fact, they're not. Human organizations are much more like living, breathing organisms. They're made up of people with thoughts and aspirations and hopes and feelings. And to that extent, creating a culture of innovation is about lifting people's spirits. It's about lifting their expectations and fueling their aspirations. It's much more like gardening than engineering. It's about creating a climate in which people will flourish and feel empowered. I think of the leadership for innovation as not command and control, but climate control. Not far from where I live in LA now, there is a place called Death Valley. Death Valley is the hottest place in America. Nothing grows there because it doesn't rain. In the winter of 2004, it rained. 7 inches of rain fell on Death Valley. And in the spring of 2005, there was a phenomenon. The whole floor of Death Valley was carpeted in flowers. If you go online and Google this, you'll see it. Just Google Death Valley Spring 2005. For a few weeks, Death Valley became a meadow, like a pasture. Well, what it proved was that Death Valley is not dead. It's dormant. Right beneath the surface are these seeds of possibility, waiting for the right conditions to come. Of course, it stopped raining, the sun started to beat down again, and all this growth fell beneath the surface, and there it remains now, till the next rains come, which may be years from now. But if the conditions are right, with organic systems, life is inevitable. Life will flourish. And I've seen this in companies, in communities, in schools, great schools, which have flourished in very unpromising circumstances because they had leaders who understood the conditions for growth. Great schools which have withered when a change of leadership came who didn't understand the right conditions. Great companies that die away because they don't adapt to the new environment. Great communities which rise and fall according to their ability to adapt and to dig deeply into their own creative resources. So our work here in Oklahoma is about creating the conditions for growth. And creativity always brings surprises. It's never something that's predictable. One of the things that's happened here is a great new music school, the Academy for Contemporary Music at the University of Central Oklahoma, UCO, which came out of the context that would help to create. We didn't predict it. It emerged from the ideas that were generated. And there are many here in Oklahoma. That's the great pleasure of an innovation strategy. You never quite know what you're going to get. And the opportunity is to grasp it when you see it. Joining us in a moment, so we have two, I think, remarkable people who are going to talk a little bit about their own creative process, and then we're going to have a group of people who join us here on the couch, the sofa, so to speak, to talk about the innovation strategies they've conducted. What I urge you to do, really, is to think not about whether you can copy what they talk about. That's never the point, really. It's not about copying what other people do. It's about identifying what the principles are and seeing how you can apply them in your own circumstances. What works here will work anywhere, and does, providing we recognize that the heart of innovation is the need to personalize and to customize to your own circumstances. And our hope is that the work here in Oklahoma won't just continue to grow and flourish here, but that it will help to propagate the growth of innovation across the whole country and perhaps internationally. And it's with that spirit, I want to thank you for the invitation and to move on to our next part of the conversation. Thank you very much. Would you welcome Desmond Mason and Jesse Tabish as the platform?